Hello and welcome to Somewhere on the Spectrum. My name's Emma and today I want to talk about the things we have been told. Really what I want to talk about in this video is the way that things can stick with us. Something somebody has said that has stuck with them, good or bad. The problem is, for those of us on the autistic spectrum, these things can stick longer, deeper, harder, and have a wider impact on our lives than perhaps they do so much with neurotypical people. Of course, there's always exceptions to everything. Of course, I'm not saying this is only just us that this happens to, but I do think that some of the traits that we have with autism can make it harder to cope with some of this stuff. So today I want to go over some of the things that I have been told, the traits that are related to those things, and the challenges that are impacted. So really what we're talking about a little bit today is how what someone says can be caused or fed into by society and then impacted by our traits or vice versa, so that collectively it can have an impact on us. The first one, when I was a teenager, I was told by my art teacher that I had no talent for art and there really wasn't much point in continuing. I'm probably not alone in having been told that I have no talent for art. I think this ties into a much bigger, wider topic, which is our education system. My example is about art. Your example could be about almost anything. So what I want you to do is think about, is there something that someone said to you during your education that meant that you felt you couldn't continue, there was no point in you trying, that you've then continued not trying for the rest of your life? So for me, being told at such a young age that I had no talent for art, there was no point continuing, has meant that every single time I've attempted to do some art, I have a very short fuse and I run out of energy very quickly. So I've never got any better at art. And my assumption for a long time was that's because I don't have any talent for it. So obviously I'm going to suck at it. But there's always been a part of me that really wanted to be good at art. And it was like a kind of sadness in me that I couldn't do that. I just wasn't able to do it. So there's a few things going on here. On the wider system, we are, most of us, unless you live in like Sweden or somewhere, you have been educated in an industrial education system. What that means is that education system was built to teach a lot of people, and it teaches them all the same way and the same stuff in the same way. And this is great for governments because they can tick that box of we have educated everybody. But actually, the reality is that an industrial education system affects every individual person differently, depending on how well their way of learning suits that system. So what it means is if you learn really well by being lectured to, by writing notes, by studying really hard, then you can get on pretty well in the industrial education system. But if you are not somebody who learns in that way, maybe you're somebody who likes to touch things, to turn them over, to see how they work, how they go together. Maybe you're somebody who really struggles with listening to the teacher and your brain wanders when you can only listen. So you need to have some visual cues or things to keep you interested. I'm not just talking about neurodiverse people, but without a doubt, if you have ADHD or autism, the industrial education system was likely not your friend. Or if it was your friend in the beginning, it was not your friend later. There came a point when it was too much. You couldn't learn anymore. Or certain topics you were really, really good at and other ones not so much. The industrial education system is built on the theory that every person can be educated in the same way. And that is just not true, my friend. That is just not true. what you find as you grow, and certainly for me, I'm an ESL teacher. I teach English online and I have taught English face-to-face with kids. And what I found was that everybody's different. Big surprise. So there's a lot of ways that this then affects your life. But part of the way it affects your life is your self-esteem. If you came out of school believing that you were just bad at learning stuff, that's going to affect the rest of your life. Similarly, if you come out of school believing that you're really good at learning stuff, that's going to positively affect your life. So the thing to bear in mind is if you grew up and were educated within an industrial education system, that's not your fault. And it doesn't mean that you can't learn new things. One of the most important and best things that I've learned from learning Chinese and becoming a bit obsessed with Chinese culture is that you can always learn new things. It's like a completely different way of thinking in China. Everyone can learn a new skill at any point in their life. It may take time. It may be more difficult for some people to do it, but everybody can do it. And for me, I needed that knowledge to be able to even start learning a language. Every time I tried to learn a language, I just suck at learning languages. Exactly the same as my art, right? Every time I'd start doing art, I'd just say, I suck at learning art. So understanding that our education system, the basis on which it is built, is incorrect. You don't suck if you struggled to learn at school. It just means that the way you were learning didn't suit how you learn. It wasn't your way of learning. So your job now is to figure out how do you learn so that you then can learn the things that you want to learn, right? There's stuff that we have to learn, whether we like it or not. And you can go out and learn that stuff as soon as you figure out how you acquire information. So look back at your life, the stuff that you have learned, how did you do it? And sometimes it's just going to be brute force of just every day sitting down and doing 10 minutes of whatever it is. I learned to play the piano. I still am sure to this day that if my mother hadn't forced me to sit in that stool for 20 minutes every single day, I would not be able to play the piano as well as I do now. I don't play it very well. I'm not a great pianist at all. But if I want to, I can go home and I can learn a new piece. And I'm absolutely sure that came from the fact that my mother made me sit down for 20 minutes every day. And if she hadn't, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I don't have the capacity myself. It's very, very hard for me to do that. Hence 3 years learning Chinese, and I'm still not anywhere near anything. The second part of this is our traits and how our traits impact these things. And for us, one of the challenges that we're dealing with is this idea of, do we have talent? We're often told, some of us, that we're gifted at school, but you might find that your gifted is not flat. It's like really good at this, not so good at this, you know? So for me, geography, I love geography. Social studies, I love social studies. Maths, we're right down here, way down here for maths. Maths is terrifying. That is part of the challenge. If you went to school and some things were really easy, the industrial education system made it worse. Because if some things were really easy and some things were really hard, and you're being told that you're good at some things, you're gifted, you're a natural, you're talented at things, and if you're not talented at other things, you should just give up. It's not worth it. There's no point trying. That's what we do. Because we believe what people tell us, right? We're like, oh, the teachers know best. They know this best. They know what's happening. Part of the challenge is that our challenge of learning is that some things are really good for some of us and easy for us to learn, and some things are not. That's not normal. Neurotypical people have a much flatter field of learning. They sort of generally get better at stuff. But for us, that's not really how it works. There's some things we're super good at and some things we're super bad at. And we're going to have to work harder at the things we're super bad at. And the problem with school is they're telling you don't need to bother learning because you're going to suck at it. And so you don't. You trust them and you don't do it. But actually, we do need to learn those skills still. So we need to put more time and effort. I think as well, it's relevant to have some kind of measurement of how much effort is required. That's part of the challenge too. As someone who was learning languages, I had no measurement for what was the normal amount of effort that people put into learning a language. It was only when I spoke to one of my Chinese students and I said, how do you guys learn all these characters? This is insane. And she said, my primary school teacher told me that we had to write every character 100 times so that we can memorize it. That's a measure now. Now I can say 100 times. Are you joking? Oh my God, that sounds really hard. But I have a measure that everybody else is writing these characters 100 times to get them into their head. So if I'm only writing it 4 times, it's not surprising that it's not going into my head, right? So that's the problem we have. If somebody just says, you're not good at this, so you needn't bother. And in addition, we are good at things just naturally, we don't have to try. Then we have no measure for how much effort everybody else is putting in or what's normal for an effort to put in. So we don't put any effort in and we get mad that nothing happens. I know she sees you as a friend, but you're not family. It's so painful, it hurts. This is one where it's a social thing. This is someone who was a really good friend of mine, and a friend of hers told me that I was seen not as family. Now, my mom stands sure that this was just a jealous person who was trying to make me feel less important. And she may be right. It's not really the point, though. The point is this hurt me in the time, and I believed it in the moment. This is, I think, for many people, an experience that we have of not knowing where we stand with people, of feeling that people are very, very close to us, and it turns out that we are just an acquaintance to them. And that's happened more than once, right? If you are neurodiverse, you know, there's been a lot of people, probably, who you thought you were really good friends with, and it turned out not so much. They did not reciprocate at all. So this one's really, really challenging. We, of course, from the traits perspective, we have our challenges with social understanding. So we are not able to read the signs, and the signs that we think we're in a really good friendship are often not the signs that someone else thinks we're in really good friendship. So that can be a tricky one. We're also then, for me, dealing with rejection sensitivity. Whenever this kind of comment is made, then I have huge rejection sensitivity. And that builds these kind of neural pathways of trauma that can eventually turn into CPTSD for neurodiverse people, because we're just getting, again, reinforced again and again and again that we're not important to people, that we don't matter, and that the people that we believe are really important to us, we're not important to them. And that builds this kind of trauma response that eventually means that we don't try and connect with anybody anymore, because what's the point? And it's really hard to know if they like you or not. So this deals with the social expectations within society, right? Society has a set of social expectations of what it looks like to be a friend. And often we don't fit into those social expectations. So as well as our own inability to read those social cues, there's also a societal expectation that we don't really understand what the rules are. We don't really understand what we need to do. And so often we misunderstand things. Next one. Writing isn't a proper job. As a young teenager trying to decide what to do at university, I wanted to be a writer, and my parents said writing isn't a proper job. The thing is, I have come from a neurodiverse family, and my neurodiverse family was very much a working class background. So my parents were trying to set me up for success for the future. And from their perspective, writing didn't make any money. They didn't know that going off and studying something in that way could have led me into publications, into editing, into all sorts of different diverse fields. They just heard writing and thought writers are poor. That's not a good idea. So part of the challenge sometimes for us is if we come from neurodiverse families, then we get stuck in the family story of what life is like and what we have to do in life. And that often can be quite different for our time period in a massive way, but also for us personally within our time period. We might need something completely different to what our parents believe is the right thing for us to do. And as a teenager, it's nigh on impossible to deal with that situation. So I followed my parents' advice, and I have for a long time followed my parents' advice. It's only very, very recently, like within the last 5 years, that I've had to come to terms with the fact that sometimes they don't know. Our parents grew up in a different time, and the knowledge that they had that was good and safe and right in their time is not the same as what's good and safe and right now in this time. So to some extent, you need to listen to what they say, take their advice, but then think about yourself and what's right for you. And really, is that advice the best thing in this situation? And then make your own decision. And sometimes that's going to go wrong, but sometimes it's going to go wrong if you follow them too. That's not necessarily a safer avenue. At least if you follow your gut, then you won't have any regrets, and you might learn stuff that would be really useful and valuable to your future. Part of that, I think we're dealing with self-esteem, a big thing with self-esteem and self-belief and confidence in ourselves. And I think that's really hard when we have, even by the point that we're deciding what to do at university, we have so many life experiences that tell us that we're not trustworthy. Our whole society, our whole system is constantly telling us that everything we think and feel is not right. Actually, that's wrong, especially as neurodiverse people. The lights aren't too bright. It's not too warm in here. No, you're overreacting. She didn't really mean that. She's just jealous, all of these sorts of things that we're being told all the time. No, you don't really want to be a writer. There's no money in writing. You really want to go and do something else that you don't know about and you have no idea about. We are constantly told that all of the things our body is telling us are wrong and not trustworthy. So we grow up to believe ourselves to be untrustworthy. And because we don't trust in ourselves, we're then not able to make the right decisions for ourselves. We're not able to make the right judgment. And we're undermining our self-confidence and self-esteem constantly. So then we become not confident people. We're not able to advocate for ourselves and to say, no, this is what I need, this is what I want. That's a really important one to think about. How can you build your self-confidence? How can you build your self-trust? What can you do to make yourself feel safe within your own body? I don't have your answer for you because I haven't figured that one out yet. But I think it's an important one that we work on, especially as adults who are late diagnosed. And the last one, maybe you just weren't good at your job. This one is still raw. If you go Google it, it's really common for neurodiverse people to lose their job, to be fired from their job. It happens a lot. It's really common for us to have many, many jobs, many different careers in our life as well. Although this has become a more common thing for the general public now, as time's gone on really over the last 20 years, in fact, neurodiverse people have a history of having a lot of jobs. So if you have 20 jobs on your CV, it's probably because you're neurodiverse. It's not because you're a terrible person. It's not that you're bad at jobs. It's because you're neurodiverse. And because we're neurodiverse, we don't fit. So we can start off loving that company and thinking everything's great, and then something goes wrong. Maybe the boss does something that we disagree with morally. Maybe we have someone in her team who is really difficult to work with and driving us crazy. Maybe we need more in-depth instructions than our manager is willing to give us. So many different things could be the case. And then suddenly that's no longer a good working environment for us anymore. And sometimes we get frustrated and we quit. And sometimes we're shown the door, whether we like it or not. And again, this goes back a little bit to what we were saying before about those neural pathways and the CPTSD. If you get fired enough times, you now have fear of being fired. And if you don't know that you're neurodiverse, then you don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know, why can I never fit? Why can't I keep a job for any length of time? For me, it's about 18 months. If I look back across my life, about 18 months is the amount of time that I tend to stay in a job before it goes sour. And most of the time I have left the jobs, I've been fired twice. And this comment was given to me after the last time I was fired by someone who I thought was quite close to me, who has not totally accepted that autism is a thing, sadly. Maybe you just weren't good at your job. Again, a few things happening here. We have the societal expectations of what you're going to do at work, how you behave at work, what is expected of you at work, how much in terms of instructions you're going to need, in terms of reasonable accommodations, having your own office, turning the lights down, that kind of stuff. All of these things that society has expectations for, we're not necessarily able to fit into society's expectation, which can make the working environment much, much harder for us to navigate or maintain over time. In addition, we're dealing with a lot of other stuff. We were talking about skill acquirement earlier. We might be really good at a core part of our job, but really suck at an extra part of our job that we also need to do. And that one we need help for. And these days we can ask for reasonable adjustments to be able to get support to do that part of the job. But if your company doesn't want to give you reasonable adjustments, or somebody else at the company says it's not fair that you're getting reasonable adjustments, then we have a new problem. We had the lack of self-belief and lack of self-confidence, which comes from this repeated experience again and again, where you get to the point where you're like, it's me, I'm the problem, it's me. It's the only solution, right? If you've had that many jobs and you can never keep a job for very long, then you must be the problem. Obviously, it couldn't possibly be that the entire system is built against you. Obviously, that couldn't be the problem. That would be silly to think that. It must be you. Again, we're undermining our own self-belief. We're having rejection sensitivity. Every time something goes wrong, we're like, oh my God, here we are again. Every time someone says something to us, it's reinforcing what we already know, that this isn't going to work out. This job's going to be just like all the others. And then we have the added fun bonus of rumination. Oh yeah. Rumination is the reason why I remember all of these phrases. Rumination is a problem. It's a problem for everybody, right? Everybody goes through phases where they think deeply about stuff that happened in the past. The problem is, for neurodiverse people, we get stuck. We get stuck in that rumination and we can't escape, and we go round and 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 round. And that's bad. That's really bad. So rumination is a really big problem, and you are not alone if you struggle with it. Going in those negative thoughts is really, really hard, and training your brain to escape them is equally difficult, especially because it's hard for us to maintain routines and systems. So actually, when someone says to you, just get over it, or just distract yourself, think about something else, our brains don't work that way. So first of all, you have to forgive yourself for the fact that you're getting stuck in this. You're getting stuck for a reason. What's happening is your brain is trying to solve a problem. We like solving problems, right? So something has happened, an experience has happened, and your brain is like, if I could just figure out why this happened, then I can stop it from happening again. Here's what I want to tell you. That is a waste of your time. It is a waste of your brain's time. Your brain needs to hear this. You can't solve that problem. The past is back there. It's already happened. You cannot solve that problem. It's done. It's over. You can't change it. You can't change what you said. You can't change what you did. You can't change how much effort you put in. Nothing. You can't change any of it. So that's the first thing. Recognize that's not a problem you can solve. And it's not a problem you're going to come across in the future, because every situation is different. Every collection of people in an office is different. So yes, your brain may be able to find situations that it can connect through the past and patterns that it can say, yes, that's what went wrong there. But is that going to help you identify that pattern again in the future? I'm going to say probably not. Because when it comes up again in the future, it's going to look different. And your brain in that moment is not going to identify that this is the same pattern that's happened before. It's going to think that's a new pattern, and it's going to be maybe years later, when you've processed it, that you start to notice that there is actually something that you could have done that's different. That's not to say it's unsolvable. Getting a therapist, for example, is really helpful to identify what's going on. But also, if you're in work, a therapist can really help you figure out what is going on with all these social situations and put things into perspectives that you just maybe don't have. So that can be really, really helpful to have a therapist to say, that's not actually what's happening here. There's some additional information or cues that you've missed that I can see. That means that something else is happening. So that's one thing in the moment. If you can afford it, get a counselor who understands autism and who understands neurotypical brains and can help you understand your situations at work. The other thing is working on getting your brain out of those systems and helping your brain to recognize when it has a problem that is solvable and when it has a problem that is not solvable, and practicing moving on from those insolvable problems. We will definitely come back and cover this another day because rumination is a major issue for so many people. But I don't want to try and solve that for you today because it's a big issue. It's a big issue. I think the key point for me was understanding that actually I hadn't done anything wrong. We will go over this in the future. What happened to me both times I got fired was that the manager that I started the job with was no longer there, and it was taken over by another manager who didn't want any of the people from the previous manager who were close to the previous manager to stay, or they wanted to know that you had now allied with them. And because I was always putting my head in the sand and just waiting for things to get better, I never actively tried to ally myself with the new manager. And so they saw me as a threat in both instances, and I was fired in both instances. Now, they would probably both have different reasons and excuses for firing me, but at the crux, that was the problem. I didn't align myself with the new manager, and therefore I was no longer worth keeping around. It took a long time for me to get to that, to understand that it wasn't because I wasn't good at my job. And luckily, I have a very good best friend who has worked with me, who could tell me repeatedly over time, no, you're actually really, really good at that job. You're actually really, really good at that job. So I could understand it wasn't about me. It was never about me. It had nothing to do with me. Sometimes it has to do with the society. Sometimes it has to do with the expectations in that company. Sometimes it has to do with us not understanding social cues or being able to connect to them. Sometimes it has to do with the way our brain processes stuff. We just need more help. We just need more support. We're not the problem. Society has not been built so that everybody can go to work. Society has been built so that a certain bracket of people can go to work. And the ones above that bracket don't have to do anything. They just live off the assets. And the ones below that bracket are made to feel terrible because they can't contribute to society. But that doesn't make anyone better than anyone else. And it doesn't mean that you are wrong no matter what bracket you fit into or whether you have to change brackets at some point in your life. It's just the way society's built, and it's not great for anyone. Anyway, that was a long video. I hope that's useful. Let me know in the comments if you have things that you have got stuck in your head and if you can somehow process them and think a little bit differently about them, and try putting them into the context of the world, of society, to understand that it's not actually just about you. These are often connected to other things that we might not recognize for a long, long time after they've happened. We might not be able to process and understand how it wasn't actually our fault ever. See you next time. Bye.